Hidden History: How 50,000 men slaughtered 80,000 Roman soldiers. In the scorching summer of 216 BC, the Roman Republic, the undisputed superpower of the ancient world, mustered the largest army it had ever put in the field. It was a force of nearly 87,000 soldiers, a torrent of steel and fury, utterly convinced that sheer numbers would crush their most hated enemy once and for all. By the end of a single sun-baked day, tens of thousands of them would lie dead on a dusty plain in what is still considered one of the bloodiest, most lopsided battles in human history. So how did it happen? How did an army of just 50,000 men, led by one vengeful and brilliant general, not only defeat but completely annihilate a force nearly twice its size? This is the story of a tactical masterpiece. It's the story of how Hannibal Barca used his enemy's greatest strength against them, setting a trap so perfect, so lethal, that it's still studied in military academies over 2,000 years later. This is the story of the Battle of Cannae. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. Why Rome and Carthage collided. Our story begins not on a battlefield, but with an oath. Years before Cannae, Hamilcar Barca, a veteran of a bitter war against Rome, made his 9-year-old son Hannibal swear a solemn vow to be an enemy of Rome forever. This wasn't just family business, it was the fury of an empire. Carthage, a wealthy trading power in North Africa, had clashed with the expanding Roman Republic before, and the sting of defeat had bred a deep, simmering desire for revenge. When Hannibal took command, he didn't just inherit an army, he inherited that burning grudge. In 218 BC, he did the unthinkable. To get at the heart of his enemy, he led his army, a diverse force of Africans, Spaniards, and Gauls, along with his famous war elephants, on a treacherous, death-defying march across the snow-capped Alps and right into Italy. The journey was brutal and cost him thousands of men, but strategically, it was a stroke of genius. To say Rome was stunned would be an understatement. They never saw an invasion from the north coming. For 2 years, Hannibal rampaged through Italy, handing the Romans one humiliating defeat after another, first at the Trebia River and then at Lake Trasimene. But Rome's spirit wouldn't break. They refused to give in. Instead, they doubled down. In 216 BC, the Senate authorized an unprecedented army of 8 legions, determined to find Hannibal and wipe him off the face of the earth. That fateful meeting would happen near a small supply depot in southeastern Italy called Cannae, where the stage was set for one of history's greatest and most terrible showdowns. Chapter 2. Hannibal's Impossible Odds. The armies face off. On the morning of August 2nd, 216 BC, the two armies faced each other across a flat, windswept plain. You have to imagine the scene. On one side stood the Romans, a sea of around 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. This was Roman power made flesh, disciplined, heavily armed, and totally confident. Their strategy was simple, brutal, and it usually worked. Use their overwhelming numbers to create a human battering ram and smash right through the enemy's center. In command were 2 consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro. They couldn't have been more different. Paulus was cautious and experienced, and he respected and feared Hannibal's cunning. Varro was an aggressive, arrogant populist who'd won his office by promising a quick and decisive victory. Now, Roman tradition had this odd quirk where the 2 consuls would alternate command each day. On this fateful day, it was Varro's turn to call the shots. His plan? Attack. Facing this behemoth was Hannibal's army of about 40,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. They were a patchwork of cultures, fierce Spanish swordsmen, wild Gaelic warriors, and his elite battle-hardened Libyan infantry. But their biggest advantage was their commander. Hannibal had chosen this ground carefully. He positioned his army so the morning sun was at their backs, and the hot summer wind would blow dust straight into the faces of the advancing Romans, a small but crucial disadvantage. He knew he couldn't win a straight-up fight. He wasn't planning on it. He was setting a trap. Chapter 3. The trap is set. Hannibal's tactical genius unleashed. As the Roman legions began their slow, thunderous march, Hannibal arranged his troops in a way no Roman had ever seen. He put his weakest troops, the Spanish and Gallic infantry, right in the center. Then he deliberately pushed that center line forward, creating a crescent shape that practically screamed, "Attack me!" On the flanks, held back slightly, he positioned his absolute best troops, the veteran Libyan infantry, who were armed with captured Roman gear. His superior cavalry, commanded by Hasdrubal and Marharbal, guarded the wings. Just as Hannibal predicted, the Romans took the bait. Varro ordered his legions to pack into a deep, narrow formation to maximize their pushing power and punch through what he saw as a weak, overextended Carthaginian center. The legions crashed into the crescent. The Gauls and Spaniards fought back fiercely, but just as Hannibal had ordered, they began a slow, deliberate retreat. To the Romans, it looked like the start of a rout. They roared in triumph and surged forward, pressing their advantage as the enemy line buckled. But the line wasn't breaking. It was changing shape, pulling them deeper and deeper into a pocket. That convex crescent of infantry started to invert, bending backward into a U-shape, drawing the Roman legions into the deadly embrace of the Carthaginian army. As the Romans blindly pushed forward, Hannibal's elite Libyan infantry on the flanks held firm, and suddenly the Romans found themselves being squeezed from the sides. At that exact moment, the second part of the trap snapped shut. On the wings, Hannibal's cavalry had shattered the Roman counterparts. But instead of chasing the fleeing riders off the field, they performed a stunning maneuver, wheeling around to slam into the now unprotected rear of the Roman infantry. The trap was sealed. The largest army Rome had ever assembled was now completely surrounded. Hannibal's masterpiece, the double envelopment, was complete. Chapter 4. The Slaughter at Cannae. Chaos, Fear, and Heroism. What happened next wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. The Roman legions, once an unstoppable force, were now a terrified, disorganized mob. They were packed so tightly together by the encroaching enemy that many soldiers couldn't even raise their arms to swing a sword. The Libyans pressed in from the sides, the cavalry hammered them from the rear, and the Gauls and Spaniards, their feigned retreat over, pushed back from the front. There was nowhere to run. The scene was pure butchery. For hours, under the blistering summer sun, the slaughter went on. Ancient historians claim that at the height of the chaos, over 100 Romans died every minute. The cautious consul, Aemilius Paulus, was killed along with dozens of senators and high-ranking officials, a catastrophic loss of an entire generation of Rome's leadership. By nightfall, the field was silent, covered in a carpet of the dead and dying. Ancient sources give staggering numbers, with some claiming up to 70,000 Romans killed or captured. Even conservative modern estimates put the number of dead around 50,000. Hannibal lost only about 6,000 men. It was one of the most lopsided victories in military history. The surviving consul, Varro, whose arrogance had led them into the disaster, escaped with only a handful of horsemen. The Grand Army of Rome had been annihilated in a single afternoon, sending a shockwave of pure panic through the now nearly defenseless city. Chapter 5. Legends and Lessons. The Legacy of Cannae. In the immediate aftermath, Hannibal's cavalry commander, Marharbal, supposedly urged him to march on Rome. According to the historian Livy, he famously said, "You know how to gain a victory, Hannibal, but you do not know how to use one." But Hannibal hesitated. He didn't have siege equipment, his army was exhausted, and he hoped this devastating defeat would force Rome's allies to abandon the Republic and sue for peace. This decision remains one of history's great what-ifs. While many of Rome's allies in southern Italy did defect, the core of the Republic held firm. Hardened by the disaster, Rome refused to negotiate. They adopted a new, grinding strategy of attrition, avoiding another major battle with Hannibal while they rebuilt their strength. Hannibal would stay in Italy for more than a decade, but he would never again come this close to breaking Rome. The war would eventually end, not with a Carthaginian triumph, but with Hannibal's defeat in Africa at the hands of Scipio Africanus. Still, the legacy of the battle itself is immortal. Hannibal's double envelopment at Cannae is considered a pinnacle of military tactics. For over 2,000 years, commanders from Frederick the Great to Norman Schwarzkopf have studied it as the classic example of a battle of annihilation. It's a timeless, brutal lesson that superior strategy can crush superior numbers, that the arrogance of a superpower can be its undoing, and that a single day of genius and bloodshed can change the course of history forever. If you thought the story about one of history's greatest military gambles was fascinating, go ahead and subscribe for more hidden history. Let us know in the comments what other legendary battles or brilliant commanders you'd like us to cover next. In the end, the story of Cannae is more than just a tale of winners and losers. It's a testament to the brilliance